Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Yashodanandana Braja Jana Randana Yashodanandana Braja Jana Randana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jai Mr. Paramahansa Parajikacharya Astotar Tata Shri Srimad Divine Grace Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai ISKCON BBT Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Parajikacharya Astotar Tata Shri Srimad Divine Grace Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Ki Jai Ananta Koti Vaishnavinda Ki Jai Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai Srimad Bhagavad Gita Ki Jai, Samaveda Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Shri Guru and Gauranga. Mukunda. The only thing I'm worried about is that, we're always kind of thinking, well, it's loud enough. I mean, you can hear me, right? You can hear me. But I'm not sure if this is really low, if they can hear me. Because when there's So they're monitoring it right now? You think? Huh? See? Yeah. All right, we'll discuss it. Vijay Prabhu. Because you've had experience. That's why he's here. Because he was trying to listen online. But hey. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Actually, Janardan's in his room, see, because he's sometimes working on it too. See if you can just find out for sure. Okay. On this 22nd day of September 2020 in SanDiego, we're reading from Srimad Bhagavad Gita as it is. Translation and commentary by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. We are on page 73, text number 9 of this chapter entitled Contents of the Gita Summarized. You got it? Page 73. 73. Not the bottom of the page there. Text 9. Sanjaya Vacha Eva Mukva Rishikesham Gudakesha Padantapaha Nayotsya iti Govindam Uktva Tushnim Babhuvaha. Sanjaya Vacha Eva Mukva Rishikesham Gudakesha Padantapaha Nayotsi iti Govindam Uktva Tushnim Babhuvaha. Sanjaya Vacha Eva Muktva Rishikesham Kudakesha Parantapaha Nayotsya Iti Govindam Uktva Tushnim Bhabuvaha Sanjaya Vacha Eva Muktva Rishikesham Kudakesha Parantapaha Nayotsya Iti Govindam Uktva Tushnim Bhabuvaha. Glenn. Sanjaya Vacha Eva Muktva Rishikesham Kudakesha Parantapaha Nayotsya Iti Govindam Uktva Tushnim Bhabuvaha. It's okay? Okay, good. Text 9, page 73. Meanwhile, Ed, you can chant. Eva Muktva Rishikesham Kudakesha Parantapaha Nayotsya Iti Govindam Uktva Tushnim Bhabuvaha. Go ahead, Mukunda. Eva Muktva Rishikesham Kudakesha Parantapaha Nayotsya Iti Govindam Uktva Tushnim Bhabuvaha. Gosh. Sanjaya Uvacha Eva Muktva Rishikesham Kudakesha Parantapaha Nayotsya Iti Govindam Uktva Tushnim Bhabuvaha. You want to try? Sanjaya Uvacha Eva Muktva Rishikesham Kudakesha Parantapaha Nayotsya Iti Govindam Uktva Tushnim Bhabuvaha. Sanjaya Vacha, Sanjaya said, Evam thus Uktva, speaking, Rishikesham, unto Krishna, the master of the senses, Gudakesha, Arjuna, the master of curbing ignorance, Param Tapaha, the chastiser of the enemies, Nayotsye, I shall not fight, Iti thus Govindam, unto Krishna, the giver of pleasure to the senses, Uktva, saying, Tushnim, silent, Babuva, became Ha, certainly. Translation. Sanjaya said, having spoken thus, Arjuna, chastiser of enemies, told Krishna, Govinda, I shall not fight, and fell silent. Purport. Dhritarashtra must have been very glad to understand that Arjuna was not going to fight and was instead leaving the battlefield for the begging profession. But Sanjaya disappointed him again in relating that Arjuna was competent to kill his enemies, Parantapaha. Although Arjuna was, for the time being, overwhelmed with false grief due to family affection, he surrendered unto Krishna, the supreme spiritual master, as a disciple. This indicated that he would soon be free from the false lamentation resulting from family affection, and would be enlightened with perfect knowledge of self-realization or Krishna consciousness, and would then surely fight. Thus Dhritarashtra's joy would be frustrated, since Arjuna would be enlightened by Krishna and would fight to the end. Fight to the end. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnanandana Salakaya Chakshu Unmidtam Mena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. I was born in the darkness of ignorance, but my spiritual master Srila Prabhupada opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. I offer my humble obeisance unto him and all members of Sri Parampara. So the Bhagavad Gita is kind of bracketed by these two statements, one by Arjuna here, I shall not fight. And at the end he says, Karishan Vachanetava, I shall do as you say. So this transformation is going to take place, and that's Krishna's reason for speaking. But in doing so, he gives for everyone for all time, the essential spiritual knowledge about the soul. And what are the 5 topics? Who can say? Kala, who say? What? Time, Kala. Did we say Kala? Jiva? You said karma. You said Kala, time. What do you say? Prakriti? Ishvara. Ishvara's verse. Yes, and now that was made very clear in the introduction. And Krishna will elucidate all of those and their interrelationships and how we need to know the information in the Bhagavad Gita to successfully complete the mission of human life. All right, let's go on. Tamavasha Vrishikesha Prahasan Niva Bharata Senayor Bihor Madhye Vishidan Tamidam Vachaha. O descendant of Bharat, at that time Krishna, smiling in the midst of both the armies, spoke the following words to the grief-stricken Arjuna. Purport. The talk was going on between intimate friends, namely the Rishikesh and the Gudakesh. As friends, both of them were on the same level, but one of them voluntarily became a student of the other. Krishna was smiling because a friend had chosen to become a disciple. As Lord of all, he is always in the superior position as the master of everyone. And yet the Lord agrees to be a friend, a son or a lover for a devotee who wants him in such a role. But when he was accepted as the master, he at once assumed the role and talked with the disciple like the master, with gravity, as it is required. It appears that the talk between the master and the disciple was openly exchanged in the presence of both armies, so that all were benefited. So the talks of the Bhagavad Gita are not for any particular person, society, or community, but they are for all, and friends or enemies are equally entitled to hear them. So we can just imagine how quiet everyone was. I mean, the battlefield, there's often a lot of noise going on. You got all those, the chariots, and you got the horses winning, and you got the elephants doing what they do, But everything quieted down so they could all hear. And they didn't even have a mic. Can you imagine? Thousands, millions of soldiers were hearing this. So the important thing is that it was recorded so that we can hear it now. Okay, so now Krishna begins his instruction with text 11. Shri Bhagavano Vacha Ashocchanan Vashochastvam Pragyavanangscha Bhashase Gatasuna Gatasungscha Nanusochanti Panditaha. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, while speaking learned words, you are mourning for what is not worthy of grief. Those who are wise lament neither for the living nor for the dead. Purport. The Lord at once took the position of the teacher and chastised the student, calling him indirectly a fool. The Lord said, you are talking like a learned man, but you do not know that one who is learned, one who knows what is body, what is soul, does not lament for any stage of the body, neither in the living nor in the dead condition. As explained in later chapters, it will be clear that knowledge means to know matter and spirit and the controller of both. This is a famous line. What is knowledge? Knowledge of matter, spirit, and the controller of both. Arjuna argued that religious principles should be given more importance than politics or sociology. But he did not know that knowledge of matter, soul, and the supreme is even more important than religious formularies. And because he was lacking in that knowledge, he should not have posed himself as a very learned man. As he did not happen to be a very learned man, he was consequently lamenting for something which was unworthy of lamentation. The body is born and is destined to be vanquished today or tomorrow. Therefore, the body is not as important as the soul. One who knows this is actually learned, and for him there is no cause for lamentation, regardless of the condition of the material body. So, right away, Krishna raises the discussion to a higher level. Why shouldn't one lament for the body in the living or dead condition? That's what everyone laments for. As soon as there's some death and there's a big funeral and there's all of these eulogies and things, and people are crying and so forth. You mean that's all a mistake? Yes, it's all a mistake. The whole premise of the material world is one huge illusion. namely that we're these bodies. And on the basis of the body, what family you're born into, what land you're born into, what language you speak, what's your socioeconomic condition, all of this, which all pertains simply to this particular body, that's who you take to be yourself. And you form very strong attachments to family and friends and countrymen and so many others, children and whatever. And that's your source of happiness, but it's also your source of grief and your source of unhappiness. Because those relationships are not only eventually broken, obviously, because of the time factor, the bodies eventually have to separate. But even during the time when we're in the same bodies, we're undergoing transformations. And this is why, certainly we've all had experience how our relationship with our parents changed, right? Your little children. I remember, long ago running and, my mother's bringing me back from school and coming back and giving me, and you feel a tremendous attachment there, And if the attachment isn't there in those early days, you become completely stunted, and you can emotionally and mentally, So, but the problem is that that's all we know, and so we are enacting a reflection of the original relationship with Krishna, and because it's temporary and is always changing and can be unfulfilling because it's not the relationship with the Supreme Soul, it's just a relationship with his individual souls who are as fallible as we are and as illusion as we are. It's inherently frustrating. It's like a huge tragedy. The whole material life is a huge tragedy. Great hopes are placed on your relationships, on your, how you're living in the world. You're going to be this, you're going to be that, And you may or not, due to your karma, achieve some of those things. But even if you do, you're valuing them and the pleasure you get from them, from profit, adoration, distinction, whatever it may be, is temporary. And because it's temporary, it cannot fulfill the real desires of the soul. See, the soul is by nature eternal, and our real nature is like Krishna's, Anandamayo Vyasat. Anandamaya means always full of bliss. And that's us. That's our nature, but we've lost it. We've turned away. The beautiful verse in the 11th canto describes the process, because as soon as you're detached from Krishna, even just though you forget, even though Krishna is always with you, but you forget, then immediately fear comes. Because here you are, this fragile little being, and you're in this big world, and there's forces that are way beyond you, So naturally you're fearful. So it says, Bhayam Dvitiya Binaveshitak Syad Ishada Petasi Viparhiyo Asmrti. This 11th canto, the teachings of the 9 Yogendras, sons of Rishabdev. So fear arises when the living entity turns away from Krishna. Isham apetasi literally means turning away from the Isha, the supreme controller Krishna. And Dvitiya Abhinaveshita. Dvitiya means the second energy, the material energy. Abhinaveshitak means you're absorbed. Your consciousness is absorbed in trying to dominate, trying to draw pleasure from, in just thinking of this material energy. And because of that, you become fearful. Because suddenly now you identify yourself not as an eternal soul, part and parcel of the Lord, and full of bliss, but as this fragile little organism. Maybe a human body, maybe a demigod body, maybe a lower body. But whatever it is, it's you against the world. Somehow you have to get something to eat, you need safety, you need defense, you need these 4 things. And so because of that turning away from Krishna, it says, Petata Viparhiyo, everything is upside down. Instead of being the servant of the Lord in one's constitutional position, one tries to be the master of the material energy, you see. And asmrti, you forget everything. You forget your whole real life, and you start the unending birth and death and different identities that you keep taking on. And each one you forget the last one, But the activities you perform in human form, they have results, either so-called good or so-called bad. Means that if you're acting against the laws of God, the laws of nature, then you'll suffer in this life and the next, karmic reactions. And if you're following the laws of the Vedas and so forth, then you may benefit materially. You get a better life on earth, or you get something up in heaven, you know. But it's all changing. It's all going to change. You know, you come back to it. So that's so the solution to it is tanmahiyato. This is all a result of Krishna's Maya energy, illusory energy. So Buddha, one has to be intelligent. The other night I was talking about another verse in the 11th canto. One has to be dhira, sober-minded. This comes up in a couple of verses, this word dhira. If your loved one is dying, but if you're dhira, you're not freaked out about it. You're just going on to another situation. So dhira is a very important position to come to really be able to consider things as they are, not just according to our emotions. This was Arjuna's mistake. He was considering everything in terms of his bodily relationships, rather than in terms of his spiritual relationship to Krishna, who's sitting right on the chariot with him. So this is this 11th canto verse. The Yogendra, he recommends there, one to be Buddha, intelligent. Consider these points. Buddha abhajetam will again worship that Lord who you turned away from. The whole idea is that we're being reintroduced to that person who, for eons, we were, in the spiritual world with, but we've forgotten it all. Tam abhajetam, Buddha abhajetam. Bhaktya, how should you worship? Bhaktya eka Bhaktya eka isham. That isha, that's Lord you left. The one point in devotion, not mixed devotion. And Guru Devatatma. One has to have a relation with the spiritual master, seeing as a very self and worshipable Lord also. So that's the process Krishna will give, but it's a wonderful verse. But this is why Arjuna is making a big mistake here, lamenting for what is not worthy of grief. So we want to come to that point of being dhira. Any comments or questions on this first verse? Yes, Prabhu. Hold on. You have a mic?
I won't go into detail, but
the
idea of lamenting, I understand the principle, and I've lost relatives and friends, and it's okay. But family members, this is particularly problematic because they're not taking to, no matter what I do, they're not taking to Krishna consciousness. They tolerate me. And I've begun, where they're going, I don't know, and I don't think I want to know. But it is disturbing.
It is what?
It's disturbing because I love them, and yet I know their destination is, it's not going to be Vaikuntha.
Well, this comes up in a few verses.
Okay.
Actually, because next verse, which has a long purport, because it's often, it speaks against the Mayavad idea that we all merge eventually.
Oh, yeah.
In the next verse it says, we have always existed as individuals, we exist now, and we will always exist as individuals. But then comes a famous verse about where Krishna gives a wonderful, intuitive explanation of transmigration. It says, forget about the next life or the previous life. In this very life, you can experience transmigration. Just your childhood, to young, adolescence and on up like that. And then afterward, you leave this body and you get another body. Dehantara praptir means you get another body. And so one has to be dhira, and not like Arjuna who was lamenting, But the fact is that you do feel pain. This person who you've been with, even devotees. We just had this wonderful girl, Shamali, who grew up here, left her body prematurely. She was only 36. It was a wonderful departure, but it's painful. So therefore, the next verse is about tolerance. Matra sparshastakonte shitoshna dukata. Is that because of these attachments or these relations of the senses to the sense objects or to other people like that, the sensation is there, either pleasure or pain. But it comes and it goes, and one has to tolerate. In other words, one may feel the pain of separation, but one has to have the higher perspective that this is all simply, Krishna, the workings of the material energy. And it's not something that I'm going to, completely lose my composure over. This was Arjuna's problem. His calculation of what to do and what not to do was not on the basis of Dharma, it was certainly not on the basis of what Krishna wanted, or on the basis of his strong attachments and feelings. And that's what we have to avoid. It's natural to feel, you have a relation. I mean, even devotees, we have relationships with devotees, and then they depart, and there's, a big loss there in separation. So you experience that, and you integrate it into your devotional life. You glorify the person, like we had when I was online, they had this nice memorial for Shamali, and so it becomes an act of glorification of the person and their relation with Krishna that's there, and then that soothes the pain, and you get over it, and you can grow from it. It's a question of how you do it, but it's understandable that there's some. I mean, when Prabhupada departed, the devotees were, devastated for a long time. But by his preaching that he had given, and and the books and so forth, we went on. That's how you do it. Okay, let's do the next verse here, which is a really important verse, and we'll see Prabhupada really gets into this purport. Natvevaham jatu nasam, natvam neme janadipaha. 12. Nachaiva nabhavishyama. Sarve vayamatak param. You got it. I think he has it there. Translation. Never was there a time when I did not exist, nor you, nor all these kings. Nor in the future shall any of us cease to be. Purport. In the Vedas, in the Katha Upanishad, as well as in the Shvetashvatara Upanishad, it is said that the Supreme Personality of Godhead is the maintainer of innumerable living entities, in terms of their different situations according to individual work and reaction of work. That Supreme Personality of Godhead is also, by his plenary portions, alive in the heart of every living entity. Only saintly persons who can see, within and without, the same Supreme Lord can actually attain to perfect and eternal peace. Now I think this is the translation of the verse that he's now going to quote. It's based on its... I'll say you say, Nityo Nityanam Chaitanash Chaitananam Eko Bahunam Yobadadati Kaman Tamatmastam Yena Pashyanti Dhiras Tesham Shanti Shasvati Netaresham. Katha Upanishad 2:13. You notice that in these Upanishadic verses, the meter is often a little bit irregular. You can always tell. The same Vedic truth given to Arjuna is given to all persons in the world who pose themselves as very learned, but factually have but a poor fund of knowledge. The Lord says clearly that he himself, Arjuna, and all the kings who are assembled on the battlefield are eternally individual beings, and that the Lord is eternally the maintainer of the individual living entities, both in their conditioned and in their liberated situations. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is the supreme individual person, and Arjuna, the Lord's eternal associate, and all the kings assembled there are individual eternal persons. It is not that they did not exist as individuals in the past, and it is not that they will not remain eternal persons. Their individuality existed in the past, and their individuality will continue in the future without interruption. Therefore, there is no cause for lamentation for anyone. The Mayavadi theory that after liberation the individual soul, separated by the covering of Maya or illusion, will merge into the impersonal Brahman and lose its individual existence is not supported herein by Lord Krishna, the Supreme Authority. Nor is the theory that we only think of individuality in the conditioned state supported herein. Krishna clearly says herein that in the future also the individuality of the Lord and others, as it is confirmed in the Upanishads, will continue eternally. This statement of Krishna's is authoritative because Krishna cannot be subject to illusion. If individuality were not a fact, then Krishna would not have stressed it so much, even for the future. The Mayavadi may argue that the individuality spoken of by Krishna is not spiritual but material. Even accepting the argument that the individuality is material, then how can one distinguish Krishna's individuality? Krishna affirms his individuality in the past and confirms his individuality in the future also. He has confirmed his individuality in many ways, and impersonal Brahman has been declared to be subordinate to him. Krishna has maintained a spiritual individuality all along. Now Prabhupada is referring to, perhaps to the 14th chapter, a famous line, Brahmano hi pratishtaham. I am the basis of impersonal Brahman, a very important line. So it's subordinate to him. Krishna has maintained spiritual individuality all along. If he is accepted as an ordinary conditioned soul in individual consciousness, then his Bhagavad Gita has no value as authoritative scripture. A common man with all the 4 defects of human frailty is unable to teach that which is worth hearing. The Gita is above such literature. No mundane book compares with the Bhagavad Gita. When one accepts Krishna as an ordinary man, the Gita loses all importance. The Mayavadi argues that the plurality mentioned in this verse is conventional and that it refers to the body. But previous to this verse, such a bodily conception has already been condemned. After condemning the bodily conception of the living entities, how is it possible for Krishna to place a conventional proposition on the body again? Therefore, individuality is maintained on spiritual grounds and is thus confirmed by great acharyas like Sri Ramanuja and others. It is clearly mentioned in many places in the Gita that this spiritual individuality is understood by those who are devotees of the Lord. Those who are envious of Krishna as the Supreme Personality of Godhead have no bona fide access to the great literature. The non-devotee's approach to the teachings of the Gita is something like that of a bee licking on a bottle of honey. One cannot have a taste of the honey unless one opens the bottle. Similarly, the mysticism of the Bhagavad Gita can be understood only by devotees, and no one else can taste it, as it is stated in the 4th chapter of the book. Nor can the Gita be touched by persons who envy the very existence of the Lord. Therefore, the Mayavadi explanation of the Gita is a most misleading presentation of the whole truth. Lord Chaitanya has forbidden us to read commentations made by the Mayavadis and warns that one who takes to such an understanding of the Mayavadi philosophy loses all power to understand the real mystery of the Gita. If individuality refers to the empirical universe, then there is no need of teaching by the Lord. The plurality of the individual soul in the Lord is an eternal fact and is confirmed by the Vedas as above mentioned. Okay. That last line has been fixed, I think. The plurality of the individual soul in the Lord. There's no plurality of the Lord. It means that the individuality of the Lord. I forget what the adjustment was. So these 2 lines here are often quoted. The first 2 lines of the verse in the purport. So let's just focus on those a minute, because those are worth remembering. Nityo nityanam chaitanas chaitananam. So nitya is the singular form, and then nityanam is plural. And chaitanas means conscious being, and chaitanam is plural conscious beings. So of all the eternal conscious beings, souls, either individual or the Supreme Soul, there's one, Eka, of Bahunam Yovedadati Kaman, who provides Vedadati, the necessities for all the plurals, the plurality, ourselves and all the other living beings in all the universes and everything. So that one is Krishna. And then the rest of the verse describes who can actually experience it. One has to hear that word dhira again. One has to be sober-minded and peaceful, in other words, beyond the modes of nature. So Prabhupada gives the explanation. It's a little unusual. He gives it before he gives a verse. He's describing the meaning of the verse. So Prabhupada is first going into great detail how this verse describing the eternal individuality must be on the basis of spirit, not the basis of matter, because that doesn't make any sense. How are the individual bodies that we have do merge? They all merge back into the totality of the material energy. So there is no individuality of the material body, ultimately. In other words, there is temporarily, certainly, but ultimately the substance of the body merges into the mass of earth, water, fire, air, ether, etc. So the individuality must pertain to the soul. And this comes up again in the 15th chapter. Does anyone know the verse where Krishna says, all these beings are my part and parcels, eternal partner? Mama evangsho. Mama evangsho jiva loke, jiva bhuta sanatana. The word sanatana is very important there. All these living beings are my anksha. This word anksha is critical for us. It means part and parcel, part and parcel. We have the qualities of Krishna in a very minute degree. Example of the sun and the sunshine, the ocean and the ocean drops are very pertinent, constantly being used. So that's very enlightening. It's also very encouraging. It means that we have these divine qualities that really can't be destroyed because they adhere to the soul itself. But because we're minute, they can be covered and we can completely forget about them. And that's the whole idea of the Bhagavad Gita and the whole process of yoga, especially Bhakti Yoga, is putting ourselves once again in touch with our spiritual nature by the various processes of the sense activity, mind activity, intelligence, and everything. There's a way of revitalizing our spiritual awareness. And that's exactly what Krishna is doing with Arjuna in this chapter. He's first of all getting him off the bodily platform. How many times do we hear that? Prabhu, get off the bodily platform. You've been sleeping. It's 10 o'clock. You should have got up already. The modes of nature. So, all of that, the discipline of bhakti, the practice, is a way of training and getting us back to the spiritual platform, which is invaluable, because what it does is it means that in our practical life we can tolerate so many things that would be intolerable if we're just on the bodily platform. How can you tolerate dying? I mean, as a spirit soul, I know intuitively that I'm not going to die. So that's why even Prabhupada says even the ants, the insect, they fight. If there's some danger, they'll try to get away. Something, fight or flight, whatever. Because the soul doesn't want to perish, and we're identifying with the body. You see the mistake. So once you know that you're not the body, it's like we have these great acharyas from the ancient times. I think of Prahlad, who was ready to face, all kinds of torment, because he was completely realized. He was completely absorbed in Krishna. He felt no fear. Can you imagine in such a situation? All the ways that they had to kill people at that time, throwing off a mountain, crushing, poisoning, burning, putting in the snake pit, He tried them all. And he was not only unhurt, but unperturbed. And that's what really freaked Hiranyakashipu out. Because that shows tremendous strength. It's not just physical strength, but the strength of being able to remain unmoved even when there's great danger and threat. And he didn't. That was inconceivable, because Hiranyakashipu was in tremendous fear of who was empowering Prahlad, and it turned out to be Krishna in the most fearful form, Nrsingadev. Right? So, this is one of the side benefits of Krishna consciousness. The ultimate benefit is to attain pure love for God and go back to Godhead. That's certainly true. But along the way, you can learn to tolerate a situation like this pandemic without a tremendous amount of increase in depression and thoughts of suicide. I read this. I don't know if I mentioned this. I don't think I gave a class when I mentioned this. I saw this one article where they did this interviews with people. I wanted to find out what is the mental state of people in this pandemic. This is in the United States, and they found that in the age group between 18 and 25, when you're really not settled in your life, you're trying to get your college and everything together, they asked this serious question: have you seriously thought of suicide in the last month? 25% of the people said yes, which is just inconceivable. Out of the whole population in the United States. I mean, they didn't say what if they had asked that question before in normal times, but that shows a tremendous amount of anxiety and fearfulness and discouragement. It's inconceivable. And then the group 25 to 44, which is a much larger group, of course, the number was still high at 16%. I mean, that's a devastating thing. But devotees are going through some things, But if you're chanting your rounds, you're taking shelter of devotional sangha when you can find it on the internet and everything like that, And I mean, it's possible to skate along without this. I mean, how many of you have seriously thought of suicide in the last month? 0. You see? Proof. No, I'm telling you, and that's one of the things that you realize. Krishna consciousness gives so many side benefits. Looking back on my 47 and plus years, said all the things I was saved from. This is before some of you were born. Many of you were born. You remember, Ed, when the AIDS thing hit, the early 80s, was it? And everyone was freaking out about that. I said, well, that's something I don't have to worry about. And all the cocaine and the crack cocaine epidemic in New York and all of these different things, which I would have been right in the middle of if I had just gone along the way I was going, And so Prabhupada saved us from all that, No drugs, no illicit sex. It becomes, you see, that's a great barrier against many of the horrible pains that people feel, now in the modern society. Plus, having an actual goal of life, feeling you're progressing toward it, you're contributing to the helping people become Krishna conscious. A meaningful, life. You just realize as you go through, this is a tremendous boon, even without the part of going back to Godhead, which you're aiming for. So this is, Krishna's instructions here are so revolutionary. This idea, which nobody really takes into account in the West, that we lived before and we're going to live again, and this life is not the all in all. Even if people, give lip service to, well, I'm going to go to heaven, and so forth, but really their focus is on their, what's going on here, not on their eternal relationship with God, certainly. So it's this Bhagavad Gita is invaluable, and Prabhupada's explanations, they're what make it, invaluable. It's valuable, it becomes invaluable, which means super valuable. All right, should we take on text 13? Very important verse. Dehinosmin yata dehe kaumaram yauvanam jara tata dehantada praptir Dhira satta namuyati. This word dhira keeps coming up. The purports in the verse. As the embodied soul continuously passes in this body from boyhood to youth to old age, the soul similarly passes into another body at death. A sober person is not bewildered by such a change. Now, before we go on, a little, what should I say, a note from our sponsor, so to speak. This translation has been slightly adjusted, revised, in 2 important ways, and I just want to let you know that, because you may find in your travels, you'll come across devotees who prefer the 1972 printing, called the Macmillan Gita. It wasn't printed by the BBT. The BBT didn't exist then. It was in 72 when it was printed. And so what the difference was, first of all, the slight change, which is important though, as the embodied soul continually passes. Now, continually is often used for continuously, but it really has a different meaning. Continually, if you look it up, is mostly used to mean regularly. Like we continually attend Srimad Bhagavatam class. We don't continuously attend. It means that, stopping. Continuously means without stopping. The soul is continuously going. It's not a point where, he's transmigrate and he stops, So continuously is the first one. But more importantly is the change near the end. A sober person is not bewildered by such a change. A self-realized man is not bewildered by such a change. Now, what that does, and this is what I thought when I first read it, because you joined in 73, that's all we had, the Macmillan Gita. It was our book. It's a wonderful book. Most of it is fine. But there's a problem. A self-realized person is not bewildered by such a change. Prabhupada didn't say self-realized person. That came in from another Gita. That's the whole history of the production of this Gita. Then immediately, that what I understood from that is that the person who's dying, if he's self-realized, he won't be disturbed. You see that? You see what I'm saying? But no, that sober person is Arjuna. He says Arjuna is the person who is looking on and shouldn't be disturbed when his friends and parents and his grandfather disturbed. That's what it means. So, Dhira does not mean you're self-realized. It means that you're sober-minded, you're thoughtful, you understand, what's really happening, but you're not self-realized, God-realized. That's the point. So that's a very important change, because the whole idea is that Arjuna was disturbed not as his own death. That he was a Kshatriya, he was ready to give his life, but at the death of his loved ones. He didn't want to participate in anything to do with it. And that's what Krishna is saying, no, you have to be sober. Because everyone gets another body, nobody dies. That's coming up in text 20. The one that Prabhupada quoted in his verse. The Jayate Mriyate Bhakadacha. There is no birth and no death for the soul. He's unborn, eternal, ever-existing, primeval. He is not slain when the body is slain. That's kind of summarizes the whole chapter. So just to let you know. All right. Since every living being, we're on text 213, page 78. No, you don't need it? Okay. Since every living entity is an individual soul, each is changing his body at every moment, manifesting sometimes as a child, sometimes as a youth, and sometimes as an old man. Yet the same spirit soul is there and does not undergo any change. This individual soul finally changes the body at death and transmigrates to another body. And since it is sure to have another body in the next birth, either material or spiritual, there was no cause for lamentation by Arjuna on account of death. In other words, he should be a sober person. Neither for Bhishma nor for Drona, for whom he was so much concerned. Rather, he should rejoice for the changing bodies from old to new ones, thereby rejuvenating their energy. Such changes of body account for varieties of enjoyment or suffering, according to one's work in life. So Bhishma and Drona, being noble souls, were surely going to have spiritual bodies in the next life, or at least life in heavenly bodies for superior enjoyment of material existence. So in either case, there was no cause for lamentation. Any man who has perfect knowledge of the constitution of the individual soul, the supersoul, and nature, both material and spiritual, is called a dhira, or a most sober man. Such a man is never deluded by the change of bodies. The Mayavadi theory of oneness of the spirit soul cannot be entertained, on the ground that the spirit soul cannot be cut into pieces as a fragmental portion. Such cutting into different individual souls would make the supreme cleavable or changeable, against the principle of the supreme souls being unchangeable. As confirmed in the Gita, the fragmental portions of the supreme exist eternally, sanatan, and are called chara. That is, they have a tendency to fall down into material nature. These fragmental portions are eternally so, and even after liberation, the individual soul remains the same, fragmental. But once liberated, he lives an eternal life in bliss and knowledge with the personality of Godhead. The theory of reflection can be applied to the supersoul, who is present in each and every individual body and is known as the Paramatma. He is different from the individual living entity. When the sky is reflected in water, the reflections represent both the sun and the moon and the stars also. The stars can be compared to the living entities, and the sun or moon to the Supreme Lord. The individual fragmental spirit soul is represented by Arjuna, and the Supreme Soul is the personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna. They are not on the same level, as it will be apparent in the beginning of the 4th chapter. If Arjuna is on the same level with Krishna, and Krishna is not superior to Arjuna, then the relationship of instructor and instructed becomes meaningless. If both of them are deluded by the illusory energy, Maya, then there's no need of one being the instructor and the other the instructed. Such instruction would be useless because, in the clutches of Maya, no one can be an authoritative instructor. Under the circumstances, it is admitted that Lord Krishna is the Supreme Lord, superior in position to the living entity Arjuna, who is a forgetful soul deluded by Maya. There's another change. That used to be a forgotten soul. Very poetic, and it's, yeah, I'm a forgotten soul. No. How are you a forgotten soul? Krishna never forgets you. Forgotten, that's forgetful. Prabhupada would use the word forgotten to mean forgetful. You have to learn his language. There's certain places where it's very obvious. So this verse is often the first verse. The devotees memorize when they think, I got to start memorizing some verses. Well, this is a good place to start. So if you're interested, there's a list, of course, of Bhagavad Gita verses Prabhupada would often quote, and this is certainly on that list, prominent on the list. So what's so wonderful about this verse is that if you think about it, anyone can understand it. It's like, yeah, I can remember when I was a little child, and then when I grew up a little bit, and now I'm middle-aged or old-aged, whatever it may be, but I'm the same person, right? I'm the same person. I have the same name. My mother knows me as the same name. But clearly my body has changed. So if I'm the same person, but my body has changed, then I'm not the body. I'm the knower of the body. And that indeed is what's explained in more detail, chapter 13. The soul is then called the Kshetragya. Kshetra being the field of our activity. We're actually working in this field. We have the senses, sensations, all of these. It's a field of activity. So that changes everything. When you realize that, oh, I see. I'm really eternal. There's no death. I mean, that itself is a cause for jubilation, isn't it? But that puts a lot of responsibility on us to do things that will really improve our next body, our next best body. At least to act according to the Vedas, so that you go to heaven. But that's condemned in the Gita. Why, if you know the process by which you can end this process of birth and death, which is really the main problem of the living entity. Birth and death, and in between you have those wonderful aspects of old age and disease. So where is there any happiness here? Dukali Mashashvatam. It's a place. It's temporary. Our situation is temporary. We already experienced that even before death. We can have so many experiences when we're children, peak experiences. I really enjoyed that. Boy, I'm glad I got away from that bully. So many things, I was in the hospital for a month when I was a kid. I almost died when I was a very rambunctious kid, and I had some kind of flu or something. And I was running around, my room and jumping around. Anyway, I came down with some serious thing, and they took me to the hospital. It was a disease in the spine. They were afraid it was going to get to the brain. And I'm telling you, it was a serious thing. And I would just lie there. I'm 5 years old. And my parents and my brother would visit me, but they couldn't come see me because I was contagious. So I was on the ground floor, and they would come to the window, and I remember seeing them through the window of the hospital, waving to me. I couldn't even hear them. The traumatic thing for a little kid, But I remember that, and somehow my father was freaked out. He said, "Oh, the brain must be damaged." So they did in one of those encephalographs or something, and the brain was okay. He was like, so relieved, Anyway, so that happened. I could have left my body at that point, and then who knows what would have, I wouldn't have known anything about Krishna. So this is what material life is all about. It's a series of changes. Sometimes it ends abruptly. Sometimes it goes on. Sometimes you're damaged. A lot of these poor people getting the COVID now, they don't recover fully. You must have read about that. It's not just the flu where you get over it. It's a horrible thing. And there's all this danger. I mean, it's a whole different world where anyone can be a threat to you. It's crazy. So that's what we're living through. But we're living through it. It's not eternal. We're all going to get through it one way or another. And if we have some understanding of Krishna consciousness, we'll try to stay connected with Krishna, especially through the holy name. That's the way to really tolerate all of these changes in the material world. So any questions on this? We really haven't done it justice. We could maybe read this again tomorrow. This particular verse is so important. But there's time for one or two shlokas. So here's Queen Kunti, ever our shelter. This verse is one of my favorites when I first read it. Tvayame ananya vishaya mati madhupate sakrit ratamud bhataradha gange vaugumadanvati. O Madhava, please ever fill my mind with thoughts of thee, not any other kind, as Ganges torrent flows into the sea. Let all my love flow constantly to thee. Yeah, ever useful. And then there's this little part of a verse that I started poeticizing. There's an ashtaka about Radha and Krishna, which is kind of a beginner's ashtaka for Radha Krishna worship. It's all just like they both have moon-like faces, and they both have, lotus eye. I mean, it's very beautiful, but it's not anything that anyone can read. So the last line goes, Bhaja Bhaja Tumanore Radhika Krishna Chandra. O wretched mind, just worship Shri Shri Radha Krishna Chandra and dive into an ocean full of endless bliss and wonder. You can actually instruct your mind. Bhagavad Dasa Goswami has a whole Manik Shiksha poem, 12 verses, very important. There's like commentary and everything on it, You can. Yeah, I give out these verses for free. All right, one more. So this is a prayer. Now listen, all the words begin with M. This is a tour de force of, we would call alliteration, or anupras, it's called in Sanskrit. Madhuresha madhudi mayamada bamudadi mattalika mugdha mama manana mohana madama dahi manaso maha maha moham. You're learning this one. You know it. Half know it. O Master of Mathura, lovely Lord of Goddess Shri, who play such maddening melodies upon your Murali, O Cupid's charmer, please redeem a life till now misspent by joyfully destroying my extreme bewilderment. You can all order that prayer and go before Giridhari and pray like that. Give me your email. Send me an email. I'll send you all my poetry. He knows it. Dravida 108? Okay. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. One second.